For 6.5 years he played the grieving husband, the trembling voice on television, the tears that came right on cue. He begged the cameras, "Please, just come home." The world believed him. The reporters comforted him. The neighbors prayed for him. But every time he walked down those stairs, his shoes clicked against the concrete that hid her. His missing wife wasn't missing at all. She was right there, beneath his feet. And every desperate plea he made to bring her home was said while he was standing on her grave. This is the story of Tina Satchwell, a 45-year-old woman who vanished from a small coastal town in County Cork, Ireland, in March 2017. For more than 6 years, her disappearance remained one of Ireland's most puzzling missing person cases. Searches stretched across woodlands, harbours and scrubland. Hundreds of witness statements were taken. Dozens of reported sightings were investigated across Ireland and beyond. All led nowhere. The answer, it turned out, had been hiding in plain sight from the very beginning, buried beneath the stairs of the home she shared with her husband, Richard Satchwell. This is a real crime documentary about obsession, control, and the painstaking investigative work that finally brought Tina home. Before we go deeper, subscribe if you love true crime documentaries like this one, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. Tina Satchwell was born Tina Dingan on the 30th of November 1972 in Fermoy, County Cork, Ireland. She was a petite woman, standing 5 feet 4 inches tall, with shoulder-length blonde hair and striking blue eyes. Those who knew her described her as bright, bubbly and beautiful, someone with a warmth that drew people in. She had a Tweety bird tattoo on her chest and a belly button piercing that friends and family knew well. But beneath that bubbly exterior, Tina carried complexities shaped by an unusual upbringing and a life marked by both devotion and isolation. Tina's early life had been complicated. She was raised by her grandmother, Florence Dingan, believing Florence was her mother until she was old enough for confirmation. When she went searching for her birth certificate, she discovered the truth. Her biological mother was Mary Collins, whom she had believed was her sister. The revelation hurt deeply. It was a fracture in her sense of identity, the kind of wound that shapes how a person views trust and family. But Tina remained devoted to Florence, the grandmother who had raised her with love and stability. Florence was the anchor in Tina's life, and that bond would remain unshakable throughout Tina's adulthood. Fashion was Tina's passion. Friends said she had an expensive eye for clothes and jewelry. Upstairs in her home, she kept hundreds of outfits on racks. Some brand new with tags still attached. She would buy items, wear them, then resell them at car boot sales across County Cork. It wasn't just about the clothes. The car boot sales were social events, places where she connected with a regular community of vendors and shoppers. She was always impeccably dressed, often matching her Chihuahua Ruby's outfits to her own. Her dogs, Ruby and Heidi, along with her parrot Valentine, were the children she never had. Tina was rarely seen without her beloved pets. She loved animals deeply, a trait that traced back to childhood when cats and dogs constantly followed her around Fermoy. She was a keen swimmer, loved the beach, and was drawn to Youghal's coastal beauty when she and Richard moved there in May 2016. Those closest to Tina understood she had layers to her personality. While she appeared bubbly and social, she was actually quite shy and kept to herself. Her general practitioner of nearly 2 decades described her as always friendly, open, a great communicator, who always enjoyed good health with absolutely no conditions that could end her life prematurely. She had no documented mental health issues, no psychiatric diagnosis. This would become important later because Richard would attempt to paint a very different picture of his wife, one that contradicted every medical and personal record. The death of Tina's brother Tom by suicide in 2012 devastated her profoundly. She bought Ruby the Chihuahua in 2014 specifically to help cope with the grief. The loss of Tom left a permanent scar on Tina's emotional landscape. She spoke about him often, kept his memory alive, and struggled with the weight of that loss for the rest of her life. It was a grief that Richard would later exploit, twisting it into a narrative of instability that had no basis in fact. Tina met Richard Satchwell on the 3rd of March 1989 in Colville, near Leicester, England. She was just 17. He was 22. Richard told his brother upon first seeing her that he would marry her. He described her as his trophy wife, someone who was out of his league. They began dating quickly. Richard proposed in October 1989 at Mount Pleasant, overlooking Youghal Bay. They married on Tina's 20th birthday, the 30th of November 1991 in Oldham, England. But the marriage came at a cost. Richard's family was anti-Irish and gave him an ultimatum: choose them or Tina. He chose Tina and never spoke to his mother again. None of his family attended their wedding. While this might seem romantic, a man willing to abandon his entire family for the woman he loved, it was actually the first sign of the isolation that would come to define their relationship. Richard, a lorry driver from Leicester, was by all accounts obsessed with Tina. He said he worshipped her, was besotted with her, and considered her physically perfect, his beautiful Irish rose. He knew intimate details about her body, her measurements, her clothing sizes, the precise contours of her figure. He claimed to run baths for her 7 nights a week with as many suds as possible, to towel her off, to apply baby oil to her skin, and to pedicure her feet. On the surface, this devotion appeared loving, even doting. But this devotion masked something darker. Tina's half-sister, Lorraine Howard, would later testify that Richard was obsessive, possessive, controlling, and just odd. He would criticize every friend Tina made, finding fault with each one until her social circle grew smaller and smaller. He wanted to know where she was at all times. Tina confided to Lorraine that she felt trapped. She could never leave, she said, because he would follow her to the ends of the earth. The couple's world became just the two of them, exactly as Richard wanted it. This is a pattern recognizable to experts in domestic coercion and control: the gradual erosion of external relationships, the creation of dependency, the monitoring of movements. Richard was not simply a devoted husband. He was a man who could not tolerate the existence of his wife outside his immediate sphere of influence. The Satchwells moved from England to Fermoy, County Cork, in the early 1990s. In 2016, they sold their Fermoy home and bought a house at 3 Grattan Street in Youghal for €52,000, moving in May that year. The move further isolated Tina from her family and the Fermoy community, where she was well known and loved. In Youghal, she was barely known. Neighbors rarely saw her without Richard. Financially, the couple struggled. They lived on social welfare benefits, with Richard listed as Tina's dependent. Their joint bank account was constantly overdrawn. Richard had 14 previous criminal convictions between 1999 and 2004, including larceny, social welfare fraud, theft, and public order offences. In December 2002, he served a month in Cork prison for social welfare fraud. This was a man with a documented history of dishonesty, manipulation, and criminal behaviour, a fact that would become significant as investigators began to piece together the truth. Sunday, the 19th of March 2017, Tina and Richard attended a car boot sale in Carrigtwohill, County Cork, approximately 35 kilometres from their Youghal home. Tina was in good spirits. She purchased a beautiful black jacket, a dress, and expensive perfume. She spoke with her friend John Keohane, who joked about her meeting another man. Tina responded firmly, "I have one man only. I love him so much and I wouldn't touch another man." These were the last words anyone outside her home would hear her speak. Within 24 hours, Tina Satchwell would be dead. Friday, the 24th of March, 2017. 4 days after Tina was last seen, Richard Satchwell drove 43 kilometres to Fermoy Garda station, bypassing his local Youghal station, to report that his wife had left home 4 days earlier. Garda Connor Gately described Richard as matter-of-fact and not overly emotive. Richard explained he had waited because he thought Tina needed time to get her head straight and assumed she'd gone to stay with family in Fermoy. This delay, 4 days, was unusual. Most people report a missing spouse within hours, especially if the relationship is loving and the disappearance is out of character. But Richard waited, and when he finally reported Tina missing, he did so in a location far from his home, at a station where he was less likely to be recognized. Richard told Garda E that on Monday morning, the 20th of March, he had made Tina breakfast around 9:20. Tea, toast and his special fruit and yogurt, and He said she asked him to drive to Aldi in Dungarvan, 30 kilometers away, to buy fish and parrot food for their parrot Valentine. He claimed he left around 10 or 10:30 in the morning and returned around noon to find Tina gone, along with 2 suitcases and €26,000 in cash, allegedly stored in a box in the attic. When Richard learned that Tina's family hadn't seen her, he expressed mild concern, but maintained she had left voluntarily. The case was initially treated as a casual inquiry about someone who had left home, not a formal missing person investigation. It wasn't until the 11th of May 2017, nearly 2 months after Tina disappeared, that Richard filed a formal missing person report with Garda James Butler, providing photographs for media appeals. This second delay is also significant. 2 months is an extraordinary amount of time to wait before formally reporting a loved one missing, especially when that person has allegedly taken a substantial sum of cash and disappeared without contact. But Richard didn't just report Tina missing and wait quietly. He embarked on an extraordinary media campaign that would span years. Between June 2017 and March 2018, Richard gave at least 14 recorded media interviews, making himself uber available to television, radio, and newspaper journalists. He appeared on RTE's Crime Call, Prime Time Investigates, TV3 Virgin Media News, Ireland AM, The Ray Darcy Show, Cork's Red FM, and numerous other outlets. His most memorable appearance came on the 25th of July 2017 on RTA Crime Call. In a tearful performance, Richard looked directly into the camera lens and said, "Tina, come home. Nobody's mad at you. My arms are open. The pets are missing you. I just can't go on not knowing. Just ring the guards, let people know that you're all right." To viewers, it seemed like the desperate plea of a devoted husband. Richard told TV3 News on the 14th of July, 2017, "I never lifted a finger to her in our 28 years together." He claimed repeatedly that Tina would turn up or get in touch eventually. He said he'd be willing to take a lie detector test, though he refused when actually offered one on live radio, claiming to be feeling tired and unwell. Throughout it all, Richard maintained a narrative. He portrayed himself as a devoted husband, caring for an unstable wife. He claimed that after her brother Tom's death in 2012, Tina had become increasingly troubled and violent. This narrative was entirely contradicted by family, friends, and medical records. But Richard repeated it again and again, shaping public perception, building sympathy, and deflecting suspicion. In the days and weeks following Tina's disappearance, Richard's behavior raised eyebrows. On the 30th of March, 2017, just 10 days after Tina vanished, he texted her cousin Sarah Howard, offering her a chest freezer. "Sarah, do you want our big chest freezer?" The next day, he advertised it on the Done Deal website. "Large chest freezer, free to take away. Working perfect, just needs a clean." Why would a man whose wife had just disappeared be so eager to get rid of a large freezer? At the time, the significance of this wasn't clear. Later, it would become chillingly obvious. By late April and early May 2017, Richard was selling Tina's belongings at car boot sales, the very venues where she had spent happy hours. He sold her clothes, her Dr. Martens boots, bags, and accessories. When friends asked where Tina was, he told elaborate lies. She had a terrible infection from dry rot in the house and had gone to England for treatment. She was very sick and had lost 4 stone. She had a serious respiratory illness and couldn't attend car boot sales anymore. The items Tina had purchased on that last Sunday, the black jacket and dress, were found hanging over a door in their living room, unworn. She never got the chance to enjoy them. The first major Garda search of 3 Grattan Street occurred on the 7th of June 2017, less than 3 months after Tina's disappearance. Sergeant John Shea had already formed the opinion by late May that something criminal may have occurred. A search warrant was obtained on the basis that Tina may have been injured or incapacitated in a criminal event. 10 Garda E spent approximately 12 hours conducting what was described as a thorough, formal search of the property. Garda E photographed the home extensively. The photographs would prove haunting years later. They clearly showed relatively new, unpainted stairs, fresh plasterboard on the side of the stairs, and a new red brick wall underneath the stairwell. Forensic scientist Dr. Edward Connolly used luminol to test for blood throughout the house. The chemical reacts with blood and glows blue, but no traces were found anywhere. Not in the living room, not on the stairs, not in Richard's car. Without blood evidence and without any other obvious signs of violence, the search team collected some items, including Richard's laptop and mobile devices, but they did not break through the concrete under the stairs. They did not use a cadaver dog. They did not excavate. The house was filthy and unkempt, with dog feces covering floors and furniture, unwashed dishes piled up, and a bird cage that hadn't been cleaned in ages. But filth is not evidence of murder. The search team left, and Tina remained buried beneath the stairs, undiscovered. This failure to find Tina during the first search would haunt investigators for years. The evidence was there, visible in the photographs, detectable by a trained cadaver dog, reachable with a jackhammer. But in 2017, the resources, the expertise, or perhaps the conviction that Tina was deceased and buried in the home were not yet in place. Rural Irish policing, like policing in many jurisdictions, operates under constraints of budget, personnel, and investigative capacity. A missing person case, even one with suspicious elements, does not automatically trigger the kind of invasive forensic examination that a confirmed homicide would. The system failed Tina in that moment. She would remain in that grave for another 6 years. In the years that followed, Gardaí conducted extensive searches across County Cork. On the 19th of August, 2017, the Garda Water Unit, Irish Coast Guard, and Army personnel searched Youghal Harbour at low tide and scrubland at Golf Links Road. In March 2018, a major operation focused on Mitchell's Wood in Castlemartyr. Over 60 trained Gardaí, Army engineers, and cadaver dogs spent nearly 2 weeks searching the 40-acre woodland site. A no-fly zone was established, but nothing was found. The investigation pursued over 400 lines of inquiry over the years. There were 60 to 65 reported sightings of Tina in Ireland and abroad. All were investigated. All proved negative. Over 170 witness statements were taken. 100 hours of CCTV footage were reviewed. The investigation seemed to be going nowhere. Richard Satchwell continued to live in the house on Grattan Street, continued to give interviews, continued to proclaim his innocence. And Tina remained buried beneath his feet. Then, in August 2021, everything changed. Superintendent Anne-Marie Toomey was appointed Senior Investigating Officer, her first time in this role. Along with Detective Garda Dave Kelleher as Incident Room Coordinator, a fresh team from Cork North and West Division began a comprehensive cold case review. Cold case reviews are a standard but resource-intensive investigative tool. They involve re-examining all evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, and applying new forensic or analytical techniques that may not have been available during the initial investigation. In this case, the review team had the benefit of hindsight, pattern recognition, and emerging forensic archaeology methodologies that were becoming more sophisticated in the early 2020s. The team re-examined all 400 lines of inquiry. They reviewed all CCTV footage again. They reanalyzed the 170-plus witness statements. And most importantly, they finally examined the digital devices seized back in 2017. The laptop seized in 2017 had sat unexamined for years. This is not unusual in under-resourced investigative environments where digital forensic capacity is limited and prioritized for active cases with immediate leads. But when Detective Garda Dave Kelleher finally analyzed the laptop in late 2021, he found something chilling. On Friday, the 24th of March 2017, 4 days after Tina's disappearance, and the same day Richard reported her missing, someone had searched for quicklime on the laptop at 9:08 in the evening. They watched a YouTube video titled "Quicklime and Water Reaction" twice. Quicklime is a substance used in building, but it's also known to aid decomposition and suppress odor in mass burials. The search was not casual. It was specific, deliberate, and timed precisely to the period when Richard would have been dealing with the reality of a body in his home. This was evidence of consciousness of guilt, a legal term that describes actions taken by a person that indicate awareness of having committed a crime. The quicklime search suggested that someone in that house knew there was a body that needed to be concealed and was researching methods to accelerate its decomposition. Mobile phone data extracted in February 2022 provided the second breakthrough. CCTV footage from Youghal post office showed Richard collecting social welfare at 11:10 on the morning of the 20th of March, not in Dungarvan, as he claimed, but in Youghal. Mobile phone location data proved he returned home immediately afterwards and remained there from approximately 11:10 until 12:50. This 100-minute window contradicted everything Richard had said about his movements that morning. He had not driven 30 kilometers to Dungarvan to buy fish and parrot food. He had collected his welfare payment in Youghal and returned home. And during that time, Tina was either dying or already dead in the house. Location data proved Richard had been home during the time he claimed to be shopping. The text offering Sarah Howard the freezer was found in phone records. Email and phone records established a timeline that contradicted virtually everything Richard had claimed. Investigators also discovered that Richard had made no calls to Tina's phone after the 20th of March, despite claiming he was desperately trying to reach her. He had not searched for her online. He had not posted on social media. He had done none of the things a genuinely worried spouse would do. Instead, he had immediately begun the process of disposing of her belongings and reshaping the narrative of her disappearance. By February 2022, Superintendent Toomey had formed the conclusion that Tina Satchwell was not a living person and had met with death via unlawful means. But they still didn't have a body. Without a body, a murder prosecution is possible, but extremely difficult. The legal standard is high. Prosecutors must prove beyond a reasonable doubt not only that a person is dead, but that they died as the result of a criminal act and that the accused is responsible. The phrase "no body, no crime" is not legally accurate. People have been convicted of murder without a body, but the evidentiary burden is steep. Superintendent Toomey knew that to secure a conviction, she needed to find Tina. In September 2022, Superintendent Toomey commissioned Dr. Niamh McCullough, a forensic archaeologist specializing in the search and recovery of concealed human remains, to review the case. Forensic archaeology is a relatively new discipline that applies archaeological excavation techniques to criminal investigations. Dr. McCullough's expertise lay in understanding how perpetrators conceal bodies, what environmental and structural indicators suggest burial sites, and how to recover remains without compromising forensic evidence. Her report, submitted in September 2023, was the final piece of the investigative puzzle. Dr. McCullough noted that research shows domestic homicide perpetrators commonly create false narratives and file misleading missing person reports. This was textbook behavior for a domestic killer. The media campaign, the tearful appeals, the insistence that the victim left voluntarily. Female victims of domestic homicide are typically disposed of closer to home than male victims, most within 1 kilometer. This geographic pattern is driven by practical considerations. Perpetrators in domestic settings often lack the time, resources, or emotional detachment to transport a body far from the scene. The structural changes to the Satchwell home, visible in the 2017 photographs, were red flags. Fresh concrete, new brickwork, altered flooring, all immediately following a disappearance, are classic indicators of clandestine burial. Dr. McCullough recommended an invasive search using ground-penetrating radar and cadaver dogs. On the evening of the 10th of October, 2023, Garda E arrived at 3 Grattan Street with building contractors, excavators, and a full forensic team. Richard Satchwell was arrested on suspicion of murder at 5 o'clock in the evening. The search began in earnest with a cadaver dog named Fern, a Springer Spaniel, and her handler. Cadaver dogs are trained to detect the scent of human decomposition, which can persist in soil and concrete for years, even decades. Fern showed immediate interest in the area under the stairs. Detective Garda Brian Barry, a ballistics and forensics expert, noticed something crucial. The red brick wall under the stairs looked like it was built by someone who didn't know how to build walls. The mortar was uneven. The bricks were misaligned. It was the work of an amateur trying to conceal something quickly. Using strong lights, the team examined the area closely. They lifted the old 1970s-style linoleum flooring and immediately saw what they were looking for: a rectangular patch of different-colored concrete, visibly newer than the surrounding floor. Around 9 o'clock in the evening on the 11th of October, 2023, they broke through the concrete with jackhammers. At approximately 64 centimeters depth, just over 2 feet, they found black plastic sheeting. The excavation stopped immediately. The forensic archaeologist was called. The next morning, a human hand was uncovered. Then, gradually, carefully, the full burial was excavated. At 11:30 on the morning of the 12th of October, 2023, Assistant State Pathologist Dr. Margot Bolster arrived at the scene. By noon, Richard Satchwell was rearrested, this time at a bus stop in Youghal. That evening, he was charged with murder. When the charge was read to him, he gave a cryptic reply: "Guilty or not guilty?" The remains were taken to Cork University Hospital. On the 13th of October, 2023, dental records from Tina's Fermoy dentist confirmed what everyone already knew. The body buried under the stairs for 2,396 days, 6.5 years, was Tina Satchwell. Her Tweety bird tattoo was still visible on her chest. In the left pocket of her dressing gown was her wallet, containing her public service card and various store loyalty cards. She had been there the entire time. Every search, every appeal, every tearful interview, she had been right there beneath Richard's feet. After Tina's body was discovered, Richard's story changed dramatically. He provided a new narrative to Gardaí, one that attempted to reframe Tina's death as self-defense or accidental killing. He claimed he came in from the garden shed and found Tina at the bottom of the stairs, scraping plasterboard with a chisel. He said Tina flew at him with the chisel, trying to stab him in the head. He fell backwards with Tina on top of him. To defend himself, he grabbed the belt of her dressing gown and held it at her neck until she got heavier. Within seconds, she fell limp and died in his arms. He claimed he held her body for 20 to 30 minutes, while their dogs, Ruby and Heidi, licked at her. He laid her on the couch initially, leaving her there for a day or two. When the dogs kept going to her body, he moved it to the chest freezer in their garden shed on the 22nd or 23rd of March. The freezer was unplugged. He was using it for storage, not refrigeration. Richard said he then began digging under the stairs in their sitting room. He said he worked like a robot, on automatic. The digging took from light until dark, leaving all his knuckles bleeding by the time he finished. The grave was unusually deep for a clandestine burial, 64 to 84 centimeters, over 2.5 feet, in sandy soil. On the 26th of March, 2017, Mother's Day Sunday, Richard said he retrieved Tina's body from the freezer and buried her. She was wrapped in black plastic sheeting that they had used as ground covering at car boot sales. Her body was positioned face down, and she was still wearing her dressing gown over her pajamas. The dressing gown belt was wrapped around her in a very unusual position, over the left side of her neck, under her right shoulder and arm, under her body, then knotted on the front of her chest. It was not threaded through the dressing gown loops. Richard claimed he wanted to bury her with dignity. He said he went to buy roses but could only find tulips because it was Mother's Day. He threw the flowers into the grave. They were never found. He claimed he placed her wedding ring in the pocket of her bathrobe so she would know the hand that killed her was also the hand that loved her. The ring was never located. He filled the grave with soil, then poured approximately 1 meter, over 3 feet, of concrete over it. He later built a red brick wall alongside the stairs and installed new plasterboard to conceal the area. This account, delivered to investigators after his arrest, was Richard's final attempt to control the narrative. But it contradicted physical evidence, forensic findings, and the timeline established by digital and location data. Richard Satchwell's trial began in late April 2025 at the Central Criminal Court in Dublin. The trial lasted 23 days, with testimony from over 50 witnesses. Richard pleaded not guilty to murder. Lead prosecutor Geraldine Small characterized Richard as an arch manipulator who was shamelessly brazen to the very end. The forensic evidence was compelling. Dr. Margaret Bolster found no fractures anywhere on Tina's skeleton. If Richard's account of a violent struggle involving a chisel attack were true, there would likely be defensive injuries, fractures, or other skeletal trauma. There were none. The positioning of the dressing gown belt, wrapped under the body and knotted on the chest, was inconsistent with a desperate act of self-defense. It suggested deliberate staging. The quicklime search 4 days after Tina's disappearance was damning evidence of consciousness of guilt. The CCTV and phone location data proved Richard had lied about his movements on the morning of the 20th of March. The timeline of his actions, offering the freezer 10 days after Tina's disappearance, selling her belongings within weeks, launching a media campaign while her body lay beneath the stairs, painted a picture of calculated deception. Perhaps most powerful was the parade of Richard's own media appearances. 14 video clips were shown to the jury of him making tearful appeals, professing his love, insisting Tina was still out there somewhere. The jury watched as Richard looked into the camera and begged Tina to come home, knowing now that she was buried beneath the floor he walked on every day. Defense counsel Brendan Grehan argued lack of intent. The defense's position was that if Richard had killed Tina, it was not premeditated murder, but rather a death resulting from a sudden, unplanned confrontation. Under Irish law, murder requires proof of intent to kill or cause serious harm, or recklessness as to whether death occurs. If the defense could establish that Richard acted in self-defense, or that Tina's death was accidental, the charge could be reduced to manslaughter or result in acquittal. But the prosecution's case was overwhelming. The concealment of the body, the false missing person report, the media campaign, the quicklime search, all pointed to a man who knew exactly what he had done and was determined to avoid accountability. Richard exercised his right not to testify. In criminal trials, defendants are not required to give evidence, and juries are instructed not to draw adverse inferences from a defendant's silence. But in this case, Richard's silence meant the jury never heard him explain the contradictions, the lies, or the chilling precision with which he buried his wife, and then stood on her grave for 6.5 years. The jury began deliberating on the afternoon of Tuesday, the 27th of May, 2025. They deliberated for a total of 9 hours and 28 minutes. 3 days later, at approximately 12:25 on Friday, they returned with a verdict. Guilty of murder, unanimous. Richard showed no emotion. Behind him, Tina's family wept. Mr. Justice Paul McDermott imposed the mandatory sentence for murder, life imprisonment. In Ireland, a life sentence means a minimum term of imprisonment set by the trial judge, typically ranging from 12 years to life without parole, depending on the circumstances. Richard Satchwell will spend the rest of his life in prison. He will die behind bars, just as Tina died beneath his stairs. Outside the Central Criminal Court after the verdict, Sarah Howard spoke for the family. Tina was a kind, loving and gentle soul who loved her animals like they loved her. And that's the way we want her remembered. Today, as a family, we finally have justice for Tina. When Tina's remains were discovered in October 2023, over 200 people attended a vigil in Youghal. Many brought their dogs in tribute to Tina's love of animals. Half of her ashes were buried with her brother Tom. Half were buried with her beloved grandmother, Florence. The case ultimately succeeded because of persistence. When Superintendent Anne-Marie Toomey took over in August 2021, her methodical re-examination of every piece of evidence ultimately brought Tina home. The digital forensics that cracked the case, the quicklime search, the phone location data, had been available since 2017, but it took a fresh set of eyes, a dedicated cold case team, and the expertise of a forensic archaeologist to connect the dots. This case raises difficult questions about the investigative process in missing person cases, particularly in jurisdictions with limited resources. Ireland's Garda Síochána, like many police forces, operates under budgetary and personnel constraints that affect the depth and speed of investigations. The failure to excavate under the stairs during the 2017 search was not the result of negligence or incompetence, but rather a reflection of the evidentiary threshold required for invasive searches and the investigative priorities of a missing person inquiry. At that time, There was no direct evidence that Tina was deceased. No blood, no witnesses, no body. The structural changes to the home were suspicious but not conclusive. The decision not to excavate was defensible under the circumstances, even though it proved to be tragically wrong. The case also highlights the evolving role of forensic archaeology in criminal investigations. Dr. Niamh McCullough's involvement in 2022 was instrumental in identifying the burial site and guiding the excavation. Forensic archaeologists bring a unique skill set. They understand soil composition, decomposition processes, burial patterns, and excavation techniques that preserve evidence. In domestic homicide cases involving concealed remains, their expertise is often the difference between success and failure. The Tina Satchwell case will likely serve as a model for future investigations in Ireland and beyond, demonstrating the value of interdisciplinary approaches that combine traditional policing with specialized forensic sciences. The psychological profile of Richard Satchwell is also instructive. His behavior fits a well-documented pattern of coercive control in intimate partner relationships. Coercive control is a pattern of behavior that seeks to dominate, isolate, and manipulate a partner, often through psychological, emotional, or financial means rather than physical violence. Richard's isolation of Tina from her family and friends, his monitoring of her movements, his criticism of her social connections, and his insistence that she could never leave him are all hallmarks of coercive control. This pattern often escalates over time and, in some cases, culminates in homicide when the perpetrator perceives a loss of control or fears abandonment. Richard's media campaign after Tina's disappearance also fits a pattern observed in familial homicide cases. Perpetrators who kill family members often engage in performative grief, seeking to deflect suspicion and control the public narrative. The tearful appeals, the insistence on innocence, the creation of alternative explanations all serve to cast the perpetrator as a victim and to obscure the truth. In Richard's case, this performance was sustained for over 6 years, a testament to his capacity for deception and manipulation. But ultimately, the truth emerged. The forensic evidence, the digital trail, and the painstaking work of investigators brought Tina home and held Richard accountable. Tina Satchwell's legacy is one of resilience, love, and the enduring power of truth. She was a woman who loved animals, loved fashion, and loved life. She was trapped in a relationship that slowly strangled her independence and ultimately ended her life. But she is remembered not as a victim, but as a person. Bright, bubbly, beautiful, with an infectious smile and a passion for the things she loved. Her family's courage in speaking out, their determination to keep her memory alive, and their patience through 6.5 years of uncertainty deserve recognition. They never gave up on Tina, and in the end, justice was served. The Tina Satchwell case is a chilling true story of domestic homicide, investigative persistence, and the dark psychology of coercive control. It is a real crime documentary that reveals how a man could bury his wife beneath his own stairs and then stand on her grave for 6.5 years pleading for her return. It is a story of how forensic science, digital evidence, and cold case methodologies can crack even the most carefully concealed crimes. And it is a reminder that in the world of criminal psychology and investigative documentary, the truth, no matter how deeply buried, will eventually come to light. Tina is now at rest with her brother Tom and her beloved grandmother Florence. She is remembered as she truly was, kind, gentle, loving, with an infectious smile and a passion for fashion and animals. She deserved better than the life Richard Satchwell trapped her in. She certainly deserved better than the death he gave her, and the grave beneath the stairs where he buried her. But she also deserves to be remembered. And now, thanks to her family's courage in speaking out, she will be.